Alright guys, welcome to the Buckrow DJ Studio. My name is Marc Lattimore, aka DJ Green Eye. Today we're going to be learning three things today. We're going to learn about the definition of DJ, which is an abbreviation for disc jockey. Two, we're going to learn about different DJ consoles and the components and their functions. Third and last, we're going to learn about a scratch which was created in 1963 by an individual called DJ Grand Wizard Theodore, which is, the scratch was called the Baby Scratch. So keep tuned in, listen, keep it locked and loaded. Be right back. Okay, going into the definition of what is a DJ. Again, a DJ is an abbreviation for disc jockey. DJ is a person who plays recorded music for an audience. That individual can be a radio DJ, they can be a club DJ, and there also can be a turntablist. And a turntablist is those individuals that use records, usually turntables, to manipulate sounds on records. There are three basic DJ consoles that DJs are able to utilize for DJing. The first one that we'll talk about is called a DJ controller, which essentially it's all in one package. It will feature transport controls for the decks, volume control, speed control, and EQs. The second console that we're going to talk about is called the CDJ console. This console specializes in playing digital music for DJing. It's originally designed to play music from compact disc, to playing digital music files stored on a USB drive or S cards. In a typical use, at least two CDJs are plugged into a DJ mixer. And last, which is my personal favorite, you have the turntable DJ console. The console consists of two turntables and a mixer in the middle. Okay, so you guys have seen the different consoles that DJs use. Personally, I'm a turntablist. I like to use turntables, but that's not what we have here at the Buckrow location. We have the CDJs. So guys, be a little bit patient with us, because in order for you to DJ, you have to learn how to work the equipment. This component right here is the CDJ. The CDJ is a CD player. It's very simple to use. You just take your CD, push it in. How the CDJ knows that there's a CD in there, that you will actually see a blank mark up here in the window right here. So it knows that there's a CD in there, and if you move it as well, you'll see numbers moving. So that's kind of telling you that the CDJ knows that there's a CD in there. If you go to the left, just like a regular CD player, if you want to skip tracks, if you want to just skip around, you use the track search. If you are in a song and you just want to kind of skim and kind of get to a certain point, you use your search button. If you want to create a cue, let's say if you want to indicate where a song is first starting, you just basically hit the cue button and this orange mark would appear. So if I was mixing and I wanted to know where a certain song started at, I just basically would hit this cue button and that orange mark would be right there, so I know exactly when the song will start. And then your famous play and pause button. You just hit that just like a regular CD player and it plays, and you hit that and it stops. Fairly simple. All right, now we're on the right-hand side of the CDJ. Without getting too complicated, we're just going to learn about the actual tempo knob here. So this knob right here, this actually adjusts the song pitch. If you want the song to go slower, you just take this knob and you push it closer to the negative sign. If you want it to go faster, you just bring it up towards the plus sign right here. So this basically gives you the ability to change the speed when a song is playing. Now comes the fun part. This component right here is called the mixer. The mixer is so important because it actually gives you the ability to manipulate the music sources that are plugged into it. And there's different mixers, but just to give you a basic rundown on this mixer is broken down to channels. This is your first channel. You can kind of think of it as this row right here. This is your second channel. This is your third channel. And this is your fourth channel. So if I wanted to hook up 4 different music sources, I can do that because I have a mixer that is able to have 4 sources. So going in a little bit closer, you have your EQ portion, which is your highs right here. This is the high frequencies when you're playing music, and you can hear the treble. You have your mid and you have your bass. So that is your EQ right here. The trim, it's kind of like a volume switch, but you can adjust the volume. You can make it louder or you can make it lower if need to be. But there's also other knobs that controls the actual volume as well, which we'll talk about later on. Now this portion of the mixer is kind of my favorite part because that's where all the magic kind of happens when you're learning how to scratch. These knobs right here are called up faders. So these are knobs. They can also help as a volume adjuster, just like the trim button that we have here. These are kind of similar, but they have more of, it's pretty much used for mixing. This is pretty much just to balance sound out when you're trying to make sure that a song does not overpower another song. But you can do that with these buttons as well. So these buttons right here, they are called up faders. Okay, next up is the crossfader. The crossfader operates fairly similar to the up faders. It just depends on the DJ's preference on what fader that they want to use. I personally use this to do most of my scratching, but with the settings with this mixer, you can also utilize these up faders as well for scratching. It's just up to the DJ what they feel most comfortable with. So let's say if I had 2 music sources, one on this side, one on that side, right? The fader is in the middle. If I just want to hear what was on this side, my fader would have to be all the way to the left. So I will be hearing everything from this side. I would not hear anything that's playing on that side. If I had the fader in the middle, then I will be hearing both musical sources. I'll hear both of the CDJs, whatever CDs that they're playing, I'll hear them both mixing together. If I had my fader on this side, I would have this actually playing. I can hear this, but I will not be able to hear that. So that's kind of what the crossfader is used for. And it's also used to help you blend, but again, other DJs use it for scratching. sorry guys, just trying to get a little workout in before we go into the baby scratch portion. You're gonna learn about the baby scratch, guys. The baby scratch is the foundation of scratching. I highly suggest that before you even try to learn any other scratches, that you want to learn the baby scratches. Just like to use an analogy, you have to learn how to crawl before you can walk, and that's essentially how this is applicable to the baby scratch, of learning different scratches. The good thing about the baby scratch is that you don't have to use the faders that we talked about earlier in the lesson. The only thing that you need to worry about is doing a record movement, or in this case, a CDJ movement. You're just basically queuing up to your sound. We're basically using the ah sound, which is a sound that a lot of DJs use to learn different scratches, and this is what it sounds like. Okay? You're just basically taking your hand. You want to put your hand on a 9 o'clock. You want to think of the CDJ as like a clock, that being 12, this being 6, this being 3, and this being 9. You want to put your hand at 9 o'clock, rather if you're left-handed or right-handed, and you just work your hand back and forth. You're going just like this. Fairly simple, real easy. You don't have to use any of these buttons that are on the mixer. You just simply take your hand, again, put it on 9, and here's an actual close-up, just in case if you could not see in the angle that we were currently at. But again, you want to make sure your hand's at 9 o'clock, and you want to work back and forth. Don't forget what we talked about too, as far as the cue point. This is where our sound starts at, right where that orange mark is at. So you know where your sound is at, and you just... So the thing about scratching is that the fun part of it is you want to learn the mechanics of it. Of course, you want to learn how to do it and execute it. But the fun part is when you try to be musical, you try to develop a style, and you try to develop a way of making it sound pleasurable to people who are listening to you. I'll give you a perfect example. Again, you got the basics down, but to a person that's listening to that for 30 seconds, it's going to drive them nuts because they're hearing the exact same thing. So what I'm going to do is give you an example on how you can make the baby scratch sound a little bit more, give it a little more style, a little bit more funk to it. You hear that? That's where you can have a lot of fun at. Instead of you standing behind the turntables, you don't want to be sounding like a robot. You want to have some type of something that's musical, that's good to the ears. And ladies and gentlemen, you just learned the mechanics of learning the baby scratch, but also adding a little bit of flair to it. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Mark Lattimore signing out. Big ups to my arts team. Guys, we're about to give some prizes away. Let's keep it moving.
Hey, I'm Jordan Gonzalez, and I'm a previous club member of the Gloucester Boys and Girls Club. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite instruments, which is the guitar. If you stay tuned, you can find out how you can win this guitar this one specifically, and we'll go over some chords, we'll go over some strings and some notes. All right, so like I said, we're gonna go over a few chords and what each string is called and what notes they are based on. So you have, and I know this is kind of weird, but the strings are actually listed from bottom to top, from first to sixth. So the sixth string is what's called your bottom E. This is your lowest note on the entire guitar. Your fifth is an A string. Your fourth is a D string. Your third is a G string. Your second is your B string, and then your first is your high E string. All right, so we just went over what each string is and what note it represents. Now there's also chords that you can play and learn to learn pretty much any basic song you want to learn. So like right here, this is a C chord. Then you have a G chord. And then you have a D chord. And with those three chords, you can play a lot of songs. All right, so we just went over a few basic chords on the guitar. Once you start playing and practicing, getting more proficient at it, you can learn a little bit more difficult things. You can start playing songs from your favorite bands or your favorite musical artists. Me personally, Weezer's one of my favorites, so. All right, so we've kind of looked over this instrument a bit. This one specifically is what you would call a classical acoustic guitar. There's a little bit of difference in different types of guitars. When it comes to the musical arts and playing an instrument, you have the drums. You can be a bass player. You can be a guitarist, pianist. There's plenty of different instruments to look at. So we've kind of looked at this one. We're going to take a second and we're going to pick up my Fender Telecaster real quick and see what that one does and how it sounds different. All right. So we've got my Fender electric guitar here now. The reason that this is different than the acoustic is you don't play this usually acoustically. You can, but you're not going to hear too much. You usually have to have this hooked up to an amplifier. So I have mine hooked up right now to an amplifier, and I'm going to show you how this sounds different than an acoustic guitar. And then leaving the guitars behind, the six-string guitars, I should say, this is a bass. A bass can be six strings, but pretty much they're either a 4 or 5. This is a 4-string bass. The differences are you keep your E, A, D, and G string, and you lose your B and E string. Bass are are the low end in the music that you hear that kind of glues everything together. That comes from the low end of a bass and the kick drum. So the bass is really important, and bassists are really important to make the music all vibe together. With that one, it sounds pretty bad. So I'll just run through a little bass lick real quick and then show you how a bass sounds. All right, so we've kind of gone over each instrument a little bit. We showed you what different chords were. We showed you what the strings tunings were and what note they represent. One thing we need to talk about though is tuning. So if you play a G chord and it sounds off, it doesn't sound right, odds are one string or maybe multiple strings are out of tune. So I'm gonna play one right now. I know this guitar is out of tune because I wanted you to hear what an out of tune G chord sounds like. To the untrained ear, sounds close to a G chord, but to me, I just got disgusted by hearing that. So I'm gonna go show you how to tune each string with our handy dandy little tuner right here. Now this one is mine, but in the prize for this guitar, there's also another clip-on tuner that's very similar to this one that you will use. So I think I heard the E string out. Let's hear that. Oh, look at that. The E string is almost, it's about in between a half step off. So we're gonna tune that up to where it's on the green. If it's in the red or the yellow, it's not right. You need to get it in the green. And then we'll go through, we'll check every string. So the A is fine. The D is a little off. So let's tune that back up. Oh, it looks like the G is off as well. So we'll tune that back up. B looks okay, and the high E is okay. And now, once you hear that chord back again, it sounds a little bit more like it's supposed to be a G chord. All right, so we've showed you how to play a little bit. I'm going to teach you now a few different items on the guitar and what they're called. So right here, this entire piece here is called your headstock. This is where all the strings go to. This is what holds the tuning pegs, which are these guys right here. That's where your strings ravel into, and that's how you can tune your strings up to the correct pitch. Next up, right here, we have what's called the nut. This is where all the strings go into their own little area, and they sit in the nut so they can have proper tension going into where the tuning pegs are. Next up, we have your fretboard and neck. This is where obviously your hand would be placed to play any type of chord or anything like that. So this is your entire neck, and then actually these little pieces right here are what's called frets. So if you ever look at tablature, most of it isn't done by chord structure. It's done by, what note you're playing. So if it calls for, an F on the low E string, that's 1. And then you could go down it just like as if it were, chronologically. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. And that's the same way on each string. But they actually do represent a different note on each string. And we're going to get down here now. This is your body. For an acoustic guitar, it's very important that there be a hole, so that way what happens is when you play anything, the noise actually goes into the hole, and then acoustically is pushed out. That way it pushes air in and pushes out. That way you hear a sound when you play. If you did this with an electric guitar, it wouldn't be near as loud. Next up, we have what's called the bridge. The bridge is where the strings go through, and then they go up to the nut, and then they go up to the tuning pegs, and that's how you tune. This kind of holds all of your intonation and your action on your guitar properly. Intonation is just, if you have it properly set up, if you play, an open E on the high E, if you play it on the 12th fret, should be the exact same note and same pitch. That's intonation. Action, on the other hand, is how high the strings are from the fretboard. So me, I like a lower action, so that way I don't have to press down as hard. Some people might like a higher action. That way they can press down into it a little bit. It's really a preference thing, though. And then right here, we have where your guitar strap should connect to. On this one, we don't have one on the back or around anywhere else. I believe this one you would have to use the strap and tie it off around the neck area up here near the nut. And pretty much that's everything about this. This body style is called a dreadnought. It's not a cutaway because there's no cutout piece right here for you to get your hand a little bit lower, as if you're trying to play, some higher up, out of range stuff. And that's pretty much what you need to know about this guitar.